the divergence of individual performance from the average performance that gives you the evidence that it's not a random walk. But I mean, you now have, hedge funds becoming such a big factor in the markets that they actually, as a group, give you very close to average performance, maybe somewhat superior because they actually care about the performance, because that's how they're rewarded, with the addition of leverage, which is very important, because if you run an unleveraged portfolio, you get a different result. That's the average portfolio. If you have add leverage to it, of course, you enhance whichever direction you go. So and then you basically get the average leveraged less 20%, which is what you pay for the management. So there has to be some limit to how far that goes.
Going back to the reflexivity concept, when you've applied that, what are some of the formal techniques, modeling?
What are some of the...
What are some of the formal modeling techniques that can be used if they want to approach reflexivity?
I don't know. You know, I've had several conversations with people who try to sort of make the point that I'm making about indeterminate results, etc., in a way that would become acceptable scientifically acceptable to the economists. And maybe there is one person who's publishing a book, Roman Friedman. He claims that he has done it. Frankly, I can't understand it because it's all mathematics, which I just don't follow. I hope that he has done it. He has done it in a currency.
I wasn't actually raising that point of making it fully acceptable to science. I was interested more in just whether there weren't some techniques that would help. I was thinking that system dynamics techniques, it seemed to me, would be very appropriate for this because incorporate the feedback relations, both of a positive kind and also a negative kind. And in reflexivity, you're talking about a feedback relation.
It's two-way feedback. It's clearly a two-way feedback.
Two-way feedback, which is what those particular techniques are designed to do. Now, they've received a lot of application in the environmental field. And you talked this morning of your interest in the global warming problem. What I wanted to do is just to point out that these techniques of analysis are used extremely frequently in that particular field, but not a lot in economics.
Just picking up on your diagram about the transition of old science into new science, and on the concept of reflexivity, there is an emerging field called bioeconomics, which is based on our increasingly acute ability to use outside sensors to track the in-life functions of the human brain and of the mind. And so where the trend lines in this research are pointing is towards an ability to realistically understand the way in which the human mind is built to process information, and in the course of processing information, to insert biases about how it is to be interpreted. That would be the first time that you could, using physical means, begin to penetrate to the question of how is it that people see and make decisions in this process of reflexivity. And
I find that very encouraging. What cognitive science comes up. I mean, I don't know too much about it, and just what I pick up from reading. there's
I'm in
a
the
book
same
called The User Illusion, which I read last summer, which really kind of the same way as you feel that my idea feed into cybernetics. I felt that the findings of cognitive science really feed in to my theory of reflexivity, and particularly with what I mentioned when you were not there, it is let's say scientific evidence that you receive information on a bandwidth of more than 1 million, but you process it in consciousness on a bandwidth of 40. And also the evidence that it actually takes half a second to process it. That's the information received is always lagging. The perception or your consciousness of the information is 30 seconds, half a second delayed. I find that very sort of reinforcing of this whole idea, and also the idea that when you process it consciously, there is a rational process. You focus on it and you really deal with an issue. But there are many sort of decisions or attitudes that you assume that are not conscious. And in fact, there's now a lot of technology to exploit that. And this is the science of, let's say, also political manipulation. Lunds formulate certain words that appeal to people, and so that creates a serious problem, because you can actually manipulate people's perception of reality, and you can manipulate the truth. You don't need to just the nice old idea that we are seeking the truth and reality is out there is no longer valid. So therefore it becomes much harder to remain committed to the pursuit of reality when you also have the option of manipulating reality. That's, I think, is the new problem that we confront, because democracy and freedom and everything was product of the environment, of the Enlightenment. When you had this idea that these truths we hold to be self-evident, and that is not valid today. We have discovered that that's not valid, and that's really a very serious problem for belief in an open society, that you have to accept that you can manipulate the truth, and yet you still need to understand it. It's not enough to manipulate.
Sure, I wanted to come back to that half second before you mentioned it. I was thinking of that. Because from one point of view, half second is a very long time when the mind is really working. And although information now flows very rapidly, there's still not a half second, much more. I wonder what it would be if you're following a market actively. What's the processing time? Get the information. Because it's in that half second, or in that other delta t, whatever it is, that amount of time, that the individual has a chance to get ahead of what's going on. I mean, because we would probably agree around this room that you're not a typical investor.